I'm working on a game called Ghosts of the Zone, a combination of my favorite aspects of Daisy, Stalker, and Tarkov, created inside Facepunch's sandbox. And recently I completed one of my biggest updates to the game yet, so let's jump right into it. The biggest thing that changed since my last devlog is I've added 5 new weapons. The AS Val, the Saiga 12, the Desert Eagle, the RPG 7, and the F1 grenade. These weapons come from the Gunslinger mod for Stalker called Pripyat, which the creator generously gave me permission to use. Link in the description below. I've gotten pretty good at getting these weapons working now, exporting them from the Stalker games into Blender, and then from Blender into Sandbox, and setting up all the animations and materials. I can knock each one out pretty quickly. Overall, these new weapons round out the arsenal quite a bit, although there's still a lot left to do. Out of the new 5 weapons though, the most interesting ones were the RPG and the F1 grenade. Up until this point, none of the previous weapons I had added required any sort of projectile, but the RPG was different in that it'd have to fire a missile, so I went about setting up projectile support for weapons. You can now just tick a little box, drag a projectile entity into here, and bam, the weapon fires projectiles. This makes it really easy to implement other projectile weapons, so I'll likely be looking to add more in the future. Now with grenades, I had actually previously made a grenade weapon, but the code for it was pretty shit and it still used the old placeholder models from Stalker Anomaly. Now it's updated with the Gunslinger models and has camera animations and just looks a whole lot nicer. I also rewrote basically all of the throwing code, and now the bolt and grenade use the same weapon code and everything just feels a lot cleaner overall. Now staying in theme with updating stuff, I overhauled the movement system as well. The player is now much slower than they were before, and more deliberate with a lower acceleration and walking speed. Running speed remains the same though. I also made it so walking backwards is around 30% slower than walking forwards, but I might tweak this a bit. Another change I made is that jumping while standing still has a wind-up and an animation, as you can see here. The animation is just an offset controlled by one of Sandbox's lovely little curve editors, which means you can do some stuff like this. Jumping while running is still more or less instant, however. I've basically removed all the movement control while you're not on the ground though, so once you jump, you committed to it. Another really minor change is this slight offset that is applied to your head height when moving while crouched. It's a small detail, but it helps sell that you're crouched really well. The only big thing left to do is implement the ability to go prone. Now, that's going to be a fair amount of work, so it isn't really a priority and I put it on the back burner. Oh, and I also added this little free look system similar to what Tarkov and Rust has. You can hold middle mouse to look around without affecting where you're aiming. It's useful to check your surroundings while running, and I even made it aim your player's head so other players can see that you're doing it. Now, something that came up when I was adding grenades was I wanted to add shrapnel, and I figured I'd just use the current implementation of bullet physics I had already had working. However, there was a problem. I wanted to add a lot of shrapnel, like 80 shrapnel shards per grenade, and the current implementation of bullet physics really didn't like that. You see, with the current implementation, each bullet was an entity, the same basic object type as something like a player or an NPC. They were point entities that existed on the server and just contained some data about the bullet, like its damage, mass, and the player who shot it, alongside various ballistic properties like drag and muzzle velocity. When each bullet was spawned, it'd network all of its starting conditions to each player, and that networked client-side version of the bullet would simulate and update all of the visuals and sound effects each frame. The server-side version of the bullet, however, was hooked into the server-side tick function, and every tick it would update its position and check the hits, and delete itself if it made one. This worked pretty well most of the time, but spawning about 80 bullets at once was certainly causing an issue. I thought about the problem for a while before deciding upon a new implementation. Just delete the old system entirely and write a new one from scratch. I figured that since bullets were mostly just bundles of data and didn't really use any of the properties of an entity, I just made them their own standalone class, just a bullet. I then made a bullet manager class that is responsible for creating each bullet, and once each bullet has been created, it adds it to a big list of bullets. Each tick, we iterate through the list in reverse, deleting any bullets that make successful hits or end their lifespan. The biggest change with this new system, however, is that bullets never network themselves. Instead, the act of creating a bullet is networked. And the impact of this isn't really obvious, but what it boils down to is this. In instances where multiple bullets are created at once, for instance a shotgun or grenade shrapnel, instead of networking each bullet individually, we want to network the event that created the bullets and just create some near identical bullets on the client. So previously, a grenade exploding would have to send 80 net messages per client to set up a bunch of bullets. But now, this new system sends exactly one net message with just the random seeds used for generating the shrapnel. The client-side and server-side bullets are updated separately and never interact with each other. But the effect is convincing for the player and gives good feedback. The new system is much more lightweight and has around 5 to 10 times the performance of the old system, and is just much better written and easier to work with. By the way guys, we're like 400 subs off 10k subscribers as of recording, and apparently only 2.1% of you are actually subscribed, so if you don't want to miss any other videos, please make sure to hit that button and leave a like. Now, initially I wanted to do a big multiplayer playtest for this devlog, but I ran into some issues. The way I was setting the player model broke, and sadly Facepunch still hasn't fixed it. You see, the player model isn't actually stored locally in the game mode, it's stored on Asset Party and downloaded and mounted at runtime. The reason for this is that the player animations are handled by the extremely talented Kaiser. This setup allows him to work and update the model and animations basically whenever, without us having to bother sending files to each other or managing git pull requests and the like. Anyway, a friend of mine made this really cool looking map called Silos that we were supposed to playtest on, but we never got around to doing because of that bug. Anyway, here's some cool shots of the map because we couldn't playtest it, so there's left to do. This is their first map they've ever made in Source 2, and it turned out pretty incredible looking. So big thanks, and hopefully we'll get to test it properly soon. Now, I was actually planning to have melee weapons done for this update, but for whatever reason, I was completely unable to export the animations for the knife from Gunslinger, so instead I decided to take it upon myself to learn how to create first-person animations. I started watching some tutorials and thought about the stuff I could work on while I was learning, and decided upon making something I've always wanted to try, the blink ability from Dishonored. So I grabbed a free arms rig, set up a new project, and went about creating the animation. After watching this tutorial series in Blender, I was able to create some of these, and I think they looked pretty good. With the animations done, I then went about setting them up in s&box and quickly whipped up a prototype for the blink effect. Then I spent some time polishing all the visuals, and this is the result.
Sing, show, sing, show, sing, show, sing, show.
All in all, this took me about 10 hours of work, and I really surprised myself with what I got done. The next thing I wanted to do was practice some melee animations, so I thought some more and decided I wanted to try and animate a sword. So I asked a talented 3D modeler friend of mine if they'd be interested in modeling a sword, and they did, and it turned out great. Massive thank you to them. I put their socials in the description, so please give them a look. I then set about animating that in Blender, and did 2 vertical swings, 2 horizontal swings, a stab, and a parry. The animations are pretty unpolished, because I didn't want to spend too long on them, and once I'd gotten what I needed, I then very hastily set up a prototype melee system, inspired by games like Mordhau and Chivalry, and set up parrying and attacks. Overall, I think I learned a ton working on this little side project, and I'm very keen to take what I learned and put it into Ghost of the Zone. I've set up a control rig for the Gunslinger arms, and I'm going to try my best to animate the knife, and also maybe some unarmed punches, which I think would be pretty fun. By the way guys, if you like what I've been doing and want to support the channel, I have a Patreon, link in the description. I want to do this kind of thing full time, and with your help I'll be able to do that. In the future, I think I'm going to try making some more little add-ons like this blink ability, and upload all of the source code and assets to my Patreon. For this one, however, the entire thing is freely available right now. Again, link in the description. So, what's next? Well, actually, I have a bunch of other stuff to talk about, but this video is already getting too long and is already too late. So next video we're going to be talking about some much needed NPC updates, as well as tweaks and improvements to the inventory system, random events, anomalies, looting, all kinds of stuff. Something else I kind of skipped over in this video is the pain month Facepunch had, where they made some pretty major breaking changes to the engine that took a little bit to fix. And even now, months later, some features I had working are still broken because of those changes, but I'm slowly getting around to fixing it all up. Anyway, thank you to my Patreons. I really couldn't be doing this without your support, and it means the world to me, so thank you. Again, thanks for watching everyone. I'll see you next time. Peace.